You ever heard two black guys walking down the street? One's got 98 cents, one has $1, and it says, there's a sign that says we could turn you white for 99 cents. So they make the plan that the guy with the dollar will go in. When he comes out, if it's good, he'll give the penny to the guy, and he'll go in and do it. So the guy goes in with his dollar, he pays, he comes out. He looks amazingly white. Looks just like a white person. You know this joke?
No.
And he goes to the guy, and the guy goes, oh, man, that looks great. He goes, all right, give me the penny. I'm going to go in. And he goes, get a job, nigger.
The video you've just watched is about whitewashing, which is the practice of casting white actors to play non-white characters in movies. This practice has received a lot of criticism and also led to the lack of representation of people of color in Hollywood. It wasn't until the release of The Joy Luck Club and Crazy Rich Asians that their well-known movies can bring the nuanced portrayal of Asian families led by an all-Asian cast. So this video will focus on Chinese American females' representation in Hollywood films through these two movies. First, to help you have a better understanding of the movies, we should start from the overview of the history of immigration in the US. The first Chinese immigrants to the US began in the 1850s for the material wealth gold rush in California. The door to the American dream was closed in 1882 by the Exclusion Act, which excluded Chinese laborers from the US citizenship, leading to hardship and intolerance. In response to this, Chinese immigrants built their own self-reliant community, Chinatown, which was a big support for Chinese and non-Chinese immigrants. In the early 20th century, although the Exclusion Act was still in effect, the law legitimated Chinese merchants, diplomats, and students to enter the country. The increase in the number of children born in the US, more immigrants with professional work and financial success, World War II, and the end of the Exclusion Act in 1943 facilitated the growth and inclusion of Chinese Americans. Let's come to some overview of Chinese American women's representation in films. Although Chinese Americans account for a large proportion of Asian American groups, they were underrepresented and biased in Hollywood films. That is the reason why we want to focus on this population, specifically the females. There was a common trope of a timid, soft-spoken female Asian supporting character who required the assistance or influence of a male lead to gain confidence. This observation reaffirmed the notion of Asian women as feeble and submissive, especially to a white male partner. Some are described as seductive, dangerous, and menacing, villainous. Most of the time, Chinese American females are the side character in these films. However, when they are the main characters, they still fall into the common trope. Now, let's come to the main part, which is the analysis about Chinese American females' representation in Hollywood films through The Joy Luck Club in 1993 and Crazy Rich Asians in 2018. You may wonder why we selected these two movies, and here are the reasons. The two movies got a reputation for the development of Chinese Americans' representation in the Hollywood film industry, with major Asian casts. In most Hollywood films, Chinese American females are the side character, making up a small proportion. However, The Joy Luck Club and Crazy Rich Asians presented their story with mostly Chinese American casts, and specifically actresses as the leading roles. Among the first innovators in displaying real-life image of Chinese Americans, The Joy Luck Club couldn't change the mainstream beliefs or attitudes toward this population. As a result, its influence rapidly faded away. Most studios quickly passed on the project. There was the perception that Americans, and that especially Americans in movies, have to be white. According to Jenny Zhang, who was an executive producer for the film, the studio was nervous to put the all Asian cast on display in promotions. Not until 25 years later was there a work which inherited the idea of the Joy Luck Club, that is Crazy Rich Asians. In the context of 2018, the long-lasting underrepresentation of Chinese Americans made audience fed up with the cinematic tropes, leading to a demand to promote this group's realistic depiction. There was a change in the landscape because the press started reporting about whitewashing. Asian Americans have taken to social media to protest their lack of representation, using hashtags like "white washed out," starring John Cho and starring Constant Wu. In an interview, Yon Chu, the Crazy Rich Asians director, revealed that the Joy Luck Club was his motivation to turn the novel Crazy Rich Asian by Amy Tan into a film project with a predominant cast of Chinese American actors. The two films demonstrated a gap as well as a hybridity of identity in these people with a primarily focus on feminine aspects. So, in order to provide general information for those who haven't watched this film before, we will come to the overview of two films. The Joy Luck Club is set in pre-World War II China and contemporary San Francisco. Pre-World War II China was a country heavily embroiled in conflict with the Japanese army, whose aggression led to a foreign military presence on Chinese soil. San Francisco, however, offered freedom and peace. The Joy Luck Club revolves around the story of four pairs of immigrant Chinese mothers and their American-born daughters. Each story is a reminiscence of their past lives and struggles between mothers and daughters. The mother was brought up in traditional, conservative China, being not treated well, while daughter was born and brought up in America. Crazy Rich Asians is set mostly in Singapore and also in New York in 2018. It revolves around the lives of wealthy and elite Chinese family in Singapore. Rachel Chu, the main character, is a second-generation Chinese American brought up by a single mother who immigrated from China to America. The other characters are Nick, Rachel's boyfriend, and his mother Eleanor, who comes from extremely wealthy old money, migrating from China to Singapore. The film gives the audience an extravagant view into the lifestyle of a rich family, where there is a significant cultural difference between the central character Nick's mother and his girlfriend Rachel, an Asian American born out of wedlock.
You will never be enough.
So you've heard the overview of two films, and in these films, it is easy to recognize that there are gaps between the first Chinese American immigrant and the second generation Chinese Americans. To be specific, in the Joy Luck Club, there are breakdowns in communication between mothers and daughters, typically Waverly and her mother Linda. As for the mother Linda, at the age of 16, she's forced to marry an unknown man. At that time, Chinese women had no right to decide on their own marriage, but had to obey any arrangement of men and seniors. After escaping from the disastrous marriage, Linda immigrates to America with the expectation of a better life. In terms of the daughter Waverly, when she's young, she fiercely resists her mother's demand to play chess, since it isn't her dream, which shows American individualism. To Linda, she highly expects that Waverly can achieve the American dream, which was out of reach for Linda. Moreover, she believes that her child's achievements represent the pride to improve her face, which is common in Asian appearance. To Waverly, however, that pride represent her mother's attempt to deny that she has a separated identity and a sense of personal individual achievement. After growing up, Waverly engaged in fashions, clothes, and hair, which demonstrate the materialistic value of Americans. As a result, the two different values of Waverly and Linda create a barrier between them. Waverly only sees that her mother is trying to live through her life, and everything she does fails to live up to her mother's expectations. Mothers hope that their daughters get married to a Chinese man to have a similarity in values and norms. However, Waverly decides to choose the one she loves, though their mothers consider him to be a foreigner. She also dares to speak her mind instead of being obedient.
You don't know the power you have over me. One word from you, one look, and I'm 4 years old again, crying myself to sleep. Because nothing I do can ever please you.
So, in the Joy Luck Club, due to the differences in background, Linda brought up with Chinese value and Waverly brought up with more American values. There are breakdowns in their communication.
Well, aren't you going to say anything else?
What I should say?
About the apartment. About this. And this. Or this. All of this!
Apart from breakdowns in communication, issues with acceptance of cultural identity is also depicted. In Crazy Rich Asians, the contrast of various cultural viewpoints acts as a significant source of tension and conflict throughout the story, emphasizing the difficulties that emerge when people from different cultural backgrounds come together. In Crazy Rich Asians, Rachel Chu and Eleanor Young have different cultural origins, mirroring a broader clash between American and Chinese identities. Rachel, who is from the United States, exhibits a more Americanized value with freedom and individualism. Eleanor, on the other hand, migrated to Singapore from China, a cosmopolitan society. However, traditional Chinese values are still embedded in her. Another key factor contributing to the disparity between Rachel and Eleanor is the Chinese belief in the similarity of socio-economic background in marriage. Rachel's humble upbringing contrasts sharply with Eleanor's membership in Singapore's privileged elite.
I'm glad I found you. I'm afraid that I've been unfair.
Oh, no, you know what? I'm sorry I made an assumption. I didn't mean to offend you.
Not at all. You asked about my ring. The truth is, Nick's father had it made when he wanted to propose to me because Amma wouldn't give him the family ring. I wasn't her first choice. Honestly, I wasn't her second.
Gosh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
I didn't come from the right family, have the right connections, and Amma thought I would not make an adequate wife to her son.
But she came around, obviously.
It took many years, and she had good reason to be concerned, because I had no idea the work and the sacrifice it would take. There were many days when I wondered if I would ever measure up. But having been through it all, I know this much. You will never be enough.
Throughout the scene, Eleanor is concerned about Rachel's ability to conform to the family's traditional expectations. She assumed that Rachel would not be able to make an adequate wife to her son, Nick. According to Bensoff and Griffin, 54, this can be inferred as othering, the way a dominant culture ascribes an undesirable trait to one specific group of people. Eleanor's behavior of othering continues to be seen during the last scenes of the mahjong game.
British boarding school, or wasn't born into a wealthy family?
You're a foreigner, American, and all Americans think about is their own happiness.
Don't you want Nick to be happy?
It's an illusion. We understand how to build things that last, something you know nothing about.
She went on to say, "You are a foreigner, American, and all Americans think about is their own happiness. Indeed, we understand how to build things that last, something you know nothing about." Her employing prejudice against Rachel indicated acts of ethnocentrism from Eleanor. To put it another way, she holds the belief that the Chinese are superior to the Americans. In Crazy Rich Asians, the rising issue has something to do with the acceptance from the first Chinese immigrant, Eleanor, with Chinese identity towards the second generation immigrant with Chinese American identity, Rachel. In the previous part, we have learned about the gaps between the first Chinese American immigrants and the second generation Chinese Americans. Next, let's turn to hybridity in identity portrayed by Waverly in the Joy Luck Club and Rachel in Crazy Rich Asians. As discussed in the first part, Waverly shows her American identity through freedom, individualism, and materialism. Individualism is clearly expressed when Waverly abruptly stops playing chess in protest to her mother's constant bragging about her chess victories. In terms of materialism, Waverly has a lavish lifestyle in which she has a particular liking for beauty and fashion. For example, having her hair cut at an upscale establishment. The hybridity of Waverly is also demonstrated in her romantic relationships. In the past, she had to marry a rich Chinese man to satisfy her parents, but later they got divorced. This presents a distinction from Chinese tradition to remain loyal and obedient to a male partner in the marriage. Later, Waverly gets the freedom to choose her own partner, who is an American man, but Lindos opposed this relationship. When Waverly and her American boyfriend Rich come to her house to have dinner, Waverly isn't at any ease for fear of her parents' judgments towards Rich. She closely scrutinized her mother's facial expressions, only to discover a deeper disappointment in Lindo's eyes in every wrongdoings of Rich. Waverly knows that Rich offended her parents by constantly saying he shouldn't have done this or he shouldn't have done that. In the end, Waverly is so displeased that she doesn't bother to mention their wedding to her mother. Although there is an American appearance in the way Waverly practices freedom and individualism, deep inside her are unconscious Chinese values and beliefs. In Crazy Rich Asians, we have seen Rachel with a very American identity, freedom, and individualism. Her being American has led to issues with her boyfriend's mom Eleanor in the acceptance of cultural identity. Discovering that Rachel was born out of wedlock, Eleanor believes that Rachel can't possibly sustain a long-lasting relationship with Nick due to the stereotype that Americans are unable to build and maintain a strong family. They just cared about themselves. Rachel is like a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. A pejorative assigned to Asian Americans who have lost touch with their roots. However, Rachel is trying to get her point across that being born in America doesn't necessarily eliminate her Chinese identity. This intrinsic clash of cultural identity between being American and being Chinese has been deftly depicted through the scene of playing mahjong in the end. by informing Eleanor that she understands the game and rules of mahjong, and by keeping up with her throughout the game. Rachel is proving that not only does she get the hang of the game, but she is also a person holding a close relation to her. As the game continues, Rachel explains her reasoning as to why she did not accept the engagement from Nick.
Well, he proposed to me yesterday. He said he'd walk away from his family and from you for good. Don't worry, I turned him down.
Only a fool folds a winning hand.
There's no winning. You made sure of that. Because if Nick chose me, he would lose his family. And if he chose his family, he might spend the rest of his life resenting you.
So you chose for him.
I'm not leaving because I'm scared. Or because I think I'm not enough. Because maybe for the first time in my life, I know I am. I just love Nick so much. I don't want him to lose his mom again.
This is a symbolic moment because she does not want to place a burden on the culture where Nick was raised, family orientation. This game is not to win or lose, but it is to demonstrate that Rachel, she is also a Chinese. She also cares about others' happiness by sacrificing her own. So, the moment playing mahjong strengthened Rachel's point that being born in America does not eliminate her Chinese identity, but it is the hybridity of her root identity Chinese from her mom and her American identity from the societal conditions where she was brought up. In general, the Joy Luck Club and Crazy Rich Asians depict struggles between the first Chinese American immigrants and the second generation Chinese Americans, namely barriers in communication and issues with acceptance from the first immigrants towards the second generation. At the same time, the hybridity of identity in the second generation, being born in America, does not eliminate Chinese identity, is depthly portrayed. The Joy Luck Club and Crazy Rich Asians are among the milestones in the development of Chinese Americans' representation in the Hollywood film industry. However, satisfying the itching for the proper presentation of the Chinese American in Hollywood films may take much more time and effort.